Hey everybody, my name is Mike Shea. I am here with Ryan Mendoza. We are the
Hey,
co-creators of Miskatonic High, and we are here to talk about Miskatonic High number 17, Little Girl Lost. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing great. This is a good issue. It's both you and I think really like a heavy plotted mystery, and that's what we have here. So I think this is going to be a good one.
Yeah, I think I suggested this plot to you, but
Mhm.
in my mind, I knew this was one of your strengths, in which it plays a bit with. We'll
Yep.
find out later.
Right, and it's sort of occurred to me, because you suggested doing the ghost noir from the Anton issue a while back, and I think we both really like those sort of noir sort of mysteries of, like, a lone detective trying to figure out the mystery, and so it's definitely something we should do more often.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. I
yeah.
think it's one of those stories that we had in mind when we started the
Mhm,
series.
mhm,
Just like your issue two
mhm,
story,
mhm.
it was in the back of my mind even that early on. So
Right.
yeah,
Well, and it's nice because it seems like we're drawing in some of our interests from other things as well, just sort of bringing them into the comic.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of those things that we discussed during the conception of the series, that we
Mhm,
wanted to draw in other influences aside from horror
mhm.
and teenage angst,
Yep,
as if
although there is
as
plenty of
if
that.
there's a difference there.
True. Okay, so let's start digging in. Let's start, go ahead and talk about the cover first, because this is a pretty striking cover. I like the way you overlap the different elements, because you got Alex there, you got her with powder in the eyes, kind of blinded, and something stalking her. But then you
Uh-huh.
really use the background sort to add on different layers. So why don't you speak for a moment about how you came up with the cover?
Okay, so for this cover, I think this started. I think if people continues to continue to stay on,
Mhm,
they'll notice that we'll be going through this kinds of stories from this point until the end of the series. But I've been used to drawing covers that feature multiple characters.
mhm,
So this one was quite difficult to conceptualize because the story mainly focuses on Alex,
mhm.
although the other kids also show up. But I really wanted to focus on Alex on this cover,
Mhm,
and we'll see in future issues that I'll be doing the same for the other characters.
mhm,
So for this one, I wanted to capture uh, the feeling of Alex being distressed and confused.
mhm,
So we don't really know what the powder in her eyes is.
mhm.
It will be revealed in the issue,
Right.
but uh, I wanted her to be on the run from the cultist
Mhm.
in a way that mimics what's inside the story, but doesn't really fully spoil
Right,
the story elements that we had there. So
right.
it has all of the elements that we have in the issue, but it's more of a iconography or symbolism of what's going on in there.
Right.
So yeah, it was pretty fun when I got the ball rolling. But yeah, I seem to be having difficulties with conceptualizing covers when it comes to single characters.
Yeah. It's a challenge, and, we had talked a bit before about this season really sort of separating the kids so they're each sort of having their own story, and they're sort of on their own, and so, yeah, it was really Alex was sort of front and center, but also on her own, so I think it captured that really well.
Mm-hmm.
Um one of the things that I've talked to you before about that I really like is the way that you're able to make the colors feel soft, like with the powder in her eyes, some of her hair. You have a nice technique where doing the outlines aren't all in black. You're using
Mhm.
softer colors, and it really softens the 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 contrast between one element and the next element, and it's a process I really like. Do you wanna talk about it at all? Because I mean, we don't have to talk it solely in terms of story. I like the way, just purely the art is done as well.
Yeah, well, this is supposed to be set somewhere underground, so it
Mhm,
was supposed to be really dark, but I didn't want it to be too dark because
mhm,
it's supposed to be a cover and supposed to pop out. I mean, the concept of a cover is that when you see it in newsstands or comic shop, it's supposed to draw the eyes to it because
mhm,
there's so many comics
right,
around it. So if you make a cover too dark just because the setting is supposed to be dark,
mhm,
you're not really going to catch the eyes of the potential buyers.
right,
So for this one, I still have it in the shade of bluish hue.
mhm,
So this, if you color this in localized version, what I mean is what the color is for that particular for example, her jacket is supposed to be green, her
mhm,
hair is supposed to be yellow, so
mhm,
that's very saturated if it's in the daylight. So in the dark, it's more subdued and desaturated.
mhm,
For the backgrounds, it also helps to knock back the color. That's what the comic artist call that.
mhm,
It's supposed to bring depth to the background,
mhm,
supposedly, especially if it's filled with blacks.
mhm,
So it's sometimes hard to distinguish which is which. Just like
mhm,
this one, it has a big column in the middle and
mhm,
then some arches in the background. So if I made it all black, it would just seem like a bunch of arches,
right,
and you won't really notice the column in the middle.
mhm.
So it gives that illusion of 3D,
Yeah, depth.
like the background is more blurred than
Mhm,
what's in the front.
right,
And then I utilize some lighting techniques so that it would pop the image more.
mhm,
So it brings the characters forward and keeps the background more subdued. So
mhm,
that's basically the technique I used in here.
mhm. It works really well. It's a for me, it's a striking cover. I really like I remember you had a version when we were talking about the cover where Alex was being chased, and really we decided to add the powder to the eyes to make her more vulnerable. And I
Mhm.
think I think that really helped, because you really get the sense that she's lost, in this area, and
Mhm.
that she's really vulnerable, which, for a good horror comic, you want your heroine to feel like she's on the cusp of danger.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay. So we go ahead and we get Matt giving the previouslys this time. He appears in this issue later, but it's nice to sort of rotate in the previouslys to especially for characters we're not going to see too much of. He fills us in on the background, and then we go ahead and get into the story. Um, the story is told, there's some narration. It's basically Alex is writing in the notebook that she took from Simon back in issue 6. So if
Mhm.
for those of you who don't remember, Simon, was writing in the notebook, um, basically, writing his, transcription of the spells that they had brought back from Egypt when they had gone back in the first issue, and she had sort of taken over the notebook, and now she started writing in it. Um, she is talking about how she is working with Kerwin now. If people remember at the end of issue 13, she has agreed to become Kerwin's apprentice. And as we recall at the end of issue 13, the man that Kerwin had in his mirror, who had been involved in Alex's mother's death, was there and was dead with the blade sticking out of it. And we never really got an answer about what happened there. It was sort of left as a mystery. We saw Alex a couple of times since then, where she's sort of been tired because she's been working late at night with Kerwin, sort of studying. And so we really needed to address what happened there and what's going on with her story. And so this was an opportunity to take this mystery plot that you had come up with, as well as sort of Alex's where she is in her story, and really put them together and sort of show how she's getting in deeper and deeper into this esoteric world.
Mhm.
Yeah. So she is working on transcribing this and falls asleep while she's doing it. Isis is there. It's always fun to have Isis be there because nothing as good is as good as a haughty cat. Um, and she sort of tells us that Alex is having these dreams, and she's hoping that Alex isn't having this dream about the dead man again. And of course, she is, and we go ahead and get into that. Um, and we're immediately back where she was at the in issue 13, where um, Robert is dead, and Kerwin is there telling us about Robert's story. And we really didn't know much about him at that point. So this is kind of an opportunity for us to learn more about him. He is a widower with two college-age sons. He runs the antique shop in town. And Alex says, I killed him. Um, I really like the way you have Alex's face in shadows there on that first page. Um, it's something that I tend to write in the script a lot, and I never know what you're gonna do with it. That, we don't get to see people's faces and, there's it takes us a little while before we see people's faces, so we really understand what's going on with their emotions. Because one of the things that you do really, really well is expressions. So we get a real sense of where the character is, what the character feels when we see them. And so it's nice to sort of hide their face from time to time so we don't really know what's going on. It really heightens the mystery for me. So I really like when you do that there.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. So Kerwin is telling her that he's going to take care of the body, that this is a justified killing because Robert had killed Alex's mother and had tried to kill her. For those of you who don't remember, um, it was suggested that Alex's mother was killed trying to kill Alex instead, not her mother. And it was also, as we saw back in issue 5, the cult of the Red Rose had sent a monster to try and kill Alex there as well. Um, and so Robert is part of that cult, or is what Kerwin is telling her, and that really it's up to Alex that if she wants to stop innocent people from dying, then she's going to have to go ahead and start handling the cult of the Red Rose, and
Yeah.
sort of setting that up. Um, and really, we don't see Alex's face until the very end of this when she agrees to become Kerwin's apprentice and really is at that point almost willing to agree to anything, that Kerwin wants. She thinks this is the right thing to do, and so she's going to do it. We've seen Alex before that she has all these movie posters about these heroines who are going on these adventures and really being a sort of at the center of their stories and fixing the world and all these things. And you can see how Alex would sort of buy into this, that she would feel like, okay, magic is something, that I can do. It's my means to sort of protect the world that, really, I can be the heroine of this story. Um, and as we have seen of Kerwin is not a very nice guy, so it's might not be the best place for her to be.
correct. Yeah.
Right.
Uh, with the shadows,
Mhm.
it's nice that we don't really see her emotions.
Mhm.
So we don't really, because even if we show this, it's still not a complete picture of what happened.
Mhm.
So we don't really know the how Alex is really feeling at this moment.
Right.
So it's actually a very nice way to uh, convey blankness of her emotion because we don't want to reveal it yet
Mhm.
until later on,
Right.
where people will see it. And then, yeah, you're correct about Alex's motivation here. I
Mhm.
mean, we've seen people consumed with vengeance
Mhm.
throughout history and other stories. And it's not very rare for a young girl like
Mhm.
Alex to be, get caught up with herself and
Mhm.
her abilities and thinking that, yeah, I can do good things in the world, but she's too rash. She's
Right.
too impatient. She
Right.
wants things done her way,
Mhm.
uh, immediately,
Mhm.
like some sort of uh, misguided entitlement,
Mhm.
and that's kind of her weakness.
Mhm.
We've seen the kids show their weaknesses early on because um, they don't really have any predication to hide it.
Right.
You know what I mean? I
Mhm.
mean, Ren is Ren
Mhm.
because that's the way she's been. She's since that incident where she started seeing ghosts and her family situation and
Mhm.
the way she grew up. And then we have Matt, who's is very similar actually with
Mhm.
his parents being overbearing, especially his
Mhm.
mother, and all he wants to do is play and
Mhm.
be one of the guys.
Mhm.
And same with Sarah and Simon, who has their own problems. I
Right.
mean, family problems.
Yeah.
I could put it that way.
Sure.
There's some very dark things going on there that we'll find out even more as we go into the season.
Right.
But Alex has been sort of like the leader of the group, and she wants to project this image of being the person who has it all
Mhm.
together.
Mhm.
But she doesn't really tell the guys what is going on in her personal home life,
Right.
and she just goes to school, uh, shows people that she's this happy person and who
Mhm.
likes to help people,
Mhm.
you know. And in a way, that's who she really is.
Yeah.
But
It
like I
is.
said,
Mhm.
she does have this tendency uh to push herself. She has
Mhm.
this tenacity to do things that uh might not be too smart.
Right. Right, and also she doesn't really have anybody to guide her, you know? When you think about sort of stories about heroines or especially characters with magic elements, usually there's somebody training them, and Alex sort of pushed away the witches, and so she really doesn't have anybody training, she doesn't have anybody she can trust, she's sort of doing this on her own, and you can see how she would easily fall in with someone who doesn't have good intentions on the
Correct.
idea that they would teach her something, and sh
Correct.
yeah.
But actually, she does have somebody, and it's ISIS.
Yeah,
But who
ISIS is
wants to
really
take? But who wants to take opinions from a cat?
I have cats, and I don't wanna take their opinions at all, I wish they would shut up.
Yeah, they don't want to take. We don't want to take guidance from our cats.
No. But the nice thing, and you sort of touched on this, is when we sort of started the series, we had a spot where, this is who Ren is, this is who Matt is, this is who Sarah is, and this is who Alex is. And the nice thing, especially about this season, as they're sort of going their own separate ways, is they're really learning some lessons. We've already seen between Ren and Simon, and the whole Aswang story, it felt like there was some growth there. It felt like Simon was starting to change a little bit, and Ren is starting to change a little bit. She's learning to trust Simon. She's sort of becoming, they're growing, and we saw a little bit of that with Sarah and Matt the last issue as well. And really that's the sort of the opportunity of what we're doing here by separating the kids out is sort of giving them an opportunity to learn some lessons and learn about themselves and sort of grow a little bit. And so this story is kind of an opportunity for Alex to learn some lessons, and they're kind of tough lessons for her to learn.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the characters individually, they're all a bunch of loners.
Hmm.
And it was during the first issue that we see that, is this going to work or not? Are they going to work as a group or not?
Right.
And throughout the season one and season two, we can see that there's a lot of conflict there.
Yeah.
But we also see sparks of goodness when they
Hmm.
work together.
Yeah.
And in this season, we will definitely see that they definitely do better together than
Hmm.
when they are alone.
Yeah.
They're more vulnerable when they're alone.
Yeah, and we haven't even gotten to the worst parts yet of seeing how vulnerable they are by themselves.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah, right? Okay, so back to the story. So Alex wakes up. When she wakes up, we realize that she has got kind of a chest cold and she's not feeling too well. Her nose is a little red, so clearly, it's winter in Miskatonic, so she's got a cold. She is arguing with Isis, who is trying to get her to follow her destiny, and Alex is having none of it. Um, we also find out that her dad is still taking apart things in the house and not putting them back together again. And she heads off to go to the Miskatonic University library to learn a lesson from Kerwin. Isis tags along, but says she's gonna wait downstairs, and Alex is like, "In the library?" And Isis is like, "I'm a librarian after all. Where else would I go?"
Mhm.
Um, Herwin is teaching Alex about the cult of the Red Rose and how the cult of the Red Rose believes that Khalib Nargul offers eternal life, and that if they just do his bidding, they'll receive his bounty, which is eternal life. Um, he does a projection of what Talib Nargul's sort of cosmic uh, aspect looks like, which Alex looks. Who thought that would look like a flower? Um, which it kind of does, which is kind of the point was to call it the cult of the red rose was to sort of see in it something that looks kind of like a flower. Um, Herwin tells us that Khalib Nargul, like most of the other outer gods, does not communicate with mankind directly, if he's even aware of mankind at all. And so that the cult is reaching out blindly in the dark, hoping to hit their mark. Um, this is kind of on the nose, but it's something that I always liked reading about and talking to you about was this idea of how do the outer gods of the Lovecraft or the Cthulhu mythos, how do they deal with humanity? And the answer always is, well, they don't really. I mean, man kind of sort of forms these cults, thinks they're doing the outer gods bidding, but you never can really be sure whether the outer gods have any awareness of humankind whatsoever, or if they see them like ants or something like that. But
Correct.
so you got to think for the Cult of the Red Rose, they're trying to do what Khalib Nargul wants them to do, because Khalib Nargul offers something to do with time, something to do with eternity, something to do with eternal life, and that's
Mhm.
if I was a cult member, that's something that I would want. Would want to be able to live forever. And so they're trying to do what they think Khalib Nargul's bidding is. But they don't really, so they're sort of taking a stab at it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
mhm,
yeah. Well, we got to remember that this cult is ancient,
mhm,
and it goes back to a time where writing and reading was non-existent,
mhm,
and the only form of entertainment we had was watching the stars.
mhm,
And for me, the outer gods are simply outer cosmic phenomenons
mhm.
that's hard to comprehend as a human.
Right.
So maybe some are black holes, nebulae.
Mhm,
For the Kalib Nargul, it's more like a spherical entity who
mhm,
might look like a small galaxy or something.
mhm,
And people have really no understanding of it and could only just interpret it in a way that makes sense to humans.
mhm.
So this is how the cult of the Red Rose chose to interpret the Kalib Nargul. So if they look at the if they look at the sky
Mhm.
during those times, which is smog free,
Mhm.
they could clearly see it.
Mhm.
They probably saw a red spiral in the sky
Mhm.
and and chose to interpret it as a rose. And then later on, with when they started making their scrolls and their manuscripts, some of the monks or clan members probably drew it in a way that looks a bit more monstrous
Mhm.
because that's how it is back then. You just describe things that you cannot understand as something monstrous,
Right.
something hideous, something terrible that can wipe humanity out in a blink of an eye.
Right. I also like the idea, sort of what to touch base on what you're talking about is like, okay, imagine one of these outer gods is the representation of like a black hole. But then think of it like, what if a black hole had sentience? What if it could think? Like, would humankind even register on it? And what would
Well,
a black hole?
we don't know that because we
Right.
have very little knowledge of black holes.
Right. But, like, they wouldn't think about humankind at all, they would but we also could not possibly understand what it hungers for, what it desires, how it conceives of time. Like, all of those things are just beyond the realm of human comprehension. So, if that was a god, an outer god, we could never understand its the way it acts, if it even interacted with humans at all.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
why I always found Nyarlathotep as a very interesting character because he's
Mhm,
supposed to convey the human aspects of the outer gods. Because
mhm.
the outer gods are supposed to be stupid and just lingering in space.
Right,
And like you said, doesn't really care about humanity. If they pass through a world, they consume it.
right,
And it's not like, oh, it's dinner time. No, it's just whatever
right,
you're in my path,
right.
you get consumed.
Right, if it's even
And
that, it's like, when you walk down the street, you don't look at every blade of grass that you step on. They certainly
yeah,
probably do.
and Nyarlathotep
Mhm,
claims that he has the message of the is the mouthpiece of the outer gods and that he conveys the messages from them. So
mhm.
it's very interesting that whether it's true or not, he's a very interesting antagonist. Sorry.
Right, right, and we've seen a little bit of him already. I believe we will probably see some more of him. He might not be the only one who claims to be speaking for the outer gods, so, I think there's a lot to go there, and we probably shouldn't go too much farther down that road. Um,
Of course
just yet.
not.
Yeah. So, Kerwin has a home so Alex is not really paying attention. She's got her cold. She's, whatever. And so, like any good teacher, Kerwin assigns her some homework. She needs to learn more about the cult of the Red Rose. And so he sends her to Robert's antique store. Um, we see on from that first panel outside that's got all kinds of cool old items, and the store is actually for sale. Isis is actually a big fan of this idea. She hates Kerwin, but she thinks that it's a good idea that Alex learn more about the cult of the Red Rose, because of course Isis wants Alex to sort of do her destiny of becoming this heroine who combats or somehow somehow takes care of Khalid Nargul. That's sort of the prophecy of Alexandria that, of course, Alex wants nothing to do with. So she goes into the antique store, and there's a little bell above that goes ring ding. And Isis just barges right in because, of course, she's a cat. And there she meets Sean, who is one of Robert's college age kids. And she says, I'm looking for a gift for my dad. And she and Sean exchange some kind of pleasantries. And meanwhile, Isis, of course, sneaks off to the back of the shop where she's not supposed to go. And I kind of like this sort of awkward flirting of Alex and Sean. Alex, I don't know. Alex isn't exactly the best at flirting, and always flirts at the most inappropriate times and with the most inappropriate people. And so here she is.
She is very awkward.
She is. She is
Person.
incredibly awkward. Which is weird because she's so good at so many things, but flirting is not one of them. So anyway, I like the way you did that. I like her and sort of Sean together. I think that's cute. And then he sort of gets called away. And meanwhile, Isis says, "Hey, come back here." And they go to the back office, and they find this picture of this figure who's sort of got all kinds of stitching all over his body. And there's a book there as well called The Jailer of Duhok. She asks Isis if she knows anything about the Jailer of Duhok, and she says no, but I do know where we can learn more, because Isis is a librarian, and when all else fails, go to the library. And then Sean comes back to sort of find out if Alex found a gift, and Alex is holding up this toolbox that says, "Yeah, this is perfect." And Sean's like, "But that's not an antique." And she's like, "No, but I'll take it," because Isis is, of course, in the toolbox. And then she heads out. So let me ask you this, because I can't imagine it's easy to draw an antique store. There's a lot of details that are going through there, and I'm kind of curious how the antique store sort of becomes more important as we find out later on. But I'm sort of how you figured out how to sort of visualize the antique store. How did you decide to do it?
Yeah, well, like in anything, lots of references. You always have a mental idea of what a place would look like, and then when you look up references, you kind of get a clearer picture of what it actually looks like. But of course, you can't really copy that
Right.
In a straight way. So you take bits and pieces from it. Like I knew that there would be like old books, coins, trinkets, strange trinkets that I don't even know, cups,
Right.
jars, and then I think it was mentioned clearly in the script that it would have lots of clocks.
Yeah,
So
time.
wall clocks, wall clocks, desk clocks. So that was kind of fun, looking up a different kind of clocks and pots and jars. And you just you just put it all together, and
Mhm,
then over time you have more ideas. Oh, I should have put this in. I could put this in another panel. So
mhm,
I mean, there are people who are really good at cramming stuff in one panel, but I tend to just uh, scatter them throughout the page so that
mhm.
it looks like it's a bigger place than it actually looks
Right.
like in a single panel. So
Mhm,
there's always a new one you can find in the next panel or so.
mhm,
So yeah, it's it's quite meticulous, but if you get to visualize these things, it
mhm,
adds more to the story,
mhm,
and it makes the readers feel like they're really there.
mhm.
Or I mean, I myself haven't been to a lot of antique shops,
Oh.
maybe some small stores that I tend to just peek around and then go out because it's so dusty.
Yeah, I've spent way too much time in antique stores, so I definitely know that feeling of dustiness everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. I'd have red nose just like Alex if I stayed there too long.
Um, right. So as she's leaving, she happens across the fridge, Vice Principal Perry, and his stepdaughter Nita, um, who's there. And Nita, very quickly we realize, is sort of saying gibberish. She's talking, but we don't really understand what she's trying to say. And Alex, whenever Alex thinks anybody's in trouble or needs help, she is always quick to jump into it. And so she quickly starts talking to Nita to try and sort of figure out what's going on there. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I liken Alex to a role playing game character in a
mhm,
video game,
mhm,
or a certain player of RPGs
mhm.
where they do all the side quests.
Every single one. Yep. Oh, let me
Yeah,
do
she has
this.
to complete this. She
Oh
has
yeah.
to do it.
Oh yeah. I would imagine that Alex is a completist at just about anything.
So yeah,
Um,
that kind of makes her character quite interesting.
Right, and, to sorta get back, and I'll do this briefly because otherwise I would talk about it too long, but it's kind of that thing about Alex, which is Alex's home life is a complete and utter disaster, and so she would much rather spend every waking moment doing every side quest that could read every book that she could get her hands on, could do every bit of homework. Whatever it is that she can do to occupy herself rather than thinking about her home life, she will do it. And it
Hmm.
helps her a lot. It makes her a really functional person. And so at school, she seems like she has all the answers. She seems like she's really put together, but really she's a complete mess.
Right,
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about Alex because she is the most magical of the characters who's really embracing sort of the magic side of Miskatonic High and really sort of moving forward with it. There's always that risk that Alex takes over any story because she just jumps at these things. She wants to be a part of it. And it's really a challenge sometimes writing and coming up with the plot with you to sort of figure out, okay, how do the other characters fit in? And, how do we make sure that Alex doesn't just overwhelm it?
Mhm.
Yeah. So the fridge explains that Nita is his stepdaughter and that she's special on the spectrum. Um, Meanwhile, she's saying things like, "We're trapped, the Peacock King, ring a ding ding." And something about the peacock ring reminds Alex, she sort of gets it, but doesn't quite, it's on the tip of her tongue, but she can't figure out what it is. Um,
Mhm.
and as the fridge takes her away, she gets more and more upset. Um, you know, and then eventually she says, "That's what Khalib Nargul promises. Now hold still." and Alex is like, "Khalib Nargul," because she was just talking about it.
Hmm.
Um, but but the fridge pulls her away, um, and Alex is sort of freaked out. Um, but meanwhile, she's got this photograph. She was just in the store. Isis really wants to get inside to the library, and so, Alex sets that aside, and they head inside, and they go to Miss Meg, who is, I think, one of our favorite librarians, who fills us in on. Actually, before we get there, let's talk a bit about Nita and the fridge. Um, Nita is kind of a special character, who becomes more important to this story as we go along. And I'm sort of wondering how you decided to visualize her, how you came up with her character design.
Yeah, I wanted her to have this wholesome image,
Mhm,
very, very innocent looking. Didn't want her to be bombastic in design because I wanted her to be, uh, I wanted her words to be more prominent in
mhm,
a way. I wanted her to look like a kid
mhm,
that's obviously quite different from normal kids, and in that way, Alex can uh, kind of see that there's something inside Nida
mhm,
that's quite peculiar, but she can't put her fingers on it or
mhm,
something. So we all know that the fridge is kind of a stylish guy.
mhm.
I mean, he wears his suit very proudly. So I wanted Nida to be the same way.
Mhm,
She has this regal look to her, even though it's kind of simple. I mean,
mhm,
as a kid, it's quite impressive
mhm.
to do that. But you know, we don't get snow here, so I don't really know what coats look like there. So I just like before. I
Mhm.
had to look it up, and
Right.
I kind of found some stuff that would be appropriate for her.
Mhm.
So she has this cute pony
Yeah,
thing
the
on
the
her
sort of rings,
hair.
yeah. Mhm,
Yeah, and I thought that kind of works for her character.
mhm.
And yeah, it's quite I really like how she turned out.
I do too. And she the sort of the thought that I had, as we're looking at her is it's kind of, like those old um Greek sort of temples, the I forget what they're called,
The oracles.
yeah, the oracle. She's kind of like an oracle when you really get right down to her, where she's, she's sort of got the hat, she's got the ring, she's sort of very prim and proper, but she's got this look about her where she's clearly looking someplace else, and the way that she talks, and even the way I did the lettering of it, it really feels like she's seeing something, which is really what we wanted to get across.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think that's the right term for her, an
Mhm.
oracle of some sort. So yeah,
Right.
as we get into the story, we'll find out more why that is.
Right. I also like the little doll you gave her, so that also came up later, but it's kind of, we do these things early on in the script and then in your designs where we have things that we know are going to come become important later, and so we sort of tuck them in, someplace where the readers won't necessarily notice them too much. Like, we want them to maybe remember them, but also to then have to flip back and see it later. So the little doll becomes more important later, and
Mhm.
we sort of remember. And then I like the way that you tuck it in her arm so that we see that she always has it. So again, it's one of those nice little things. I talk about this a lot, but we really make these comics to be read more than once. You read it through the once, and then you go back and you see what we were really doing and where we were hiding things, and some of the bigger meanings of what we were trying to do. And it's one of the things that I really like about the way that you draw these things is, can suggest these little things that people won't see until the next time they're looking through. They think you're just doing little details, but of course, these things are really important.
Yeah, well, it really goes back to that age
Mhm,
that we read comics, wherein it's always filled with little details that you
mhm,
go back to after reading a bunch more of them.
mhm,
So, like, you go 10 issues later and then you notice something. Wait, I saw this thing
mhm.
10 issues ago. And then you go back, you reread it, and it means something
Yeah.
else
Mhm.
than when you read it before. And that's how I fell in love with comics back then. It's
Yeah.
those kind of little things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I love that we're doing a series where we can do that because there's a lot of comics now where you don't get that anymore. They're writing 5 issues and then they're just gonna stop, and that's the story, and there's not the expansiveness of what we're doing.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to really um, go into a continuous series. I mean, there's very little opportunities
Mhm.
in doing that in comics these days because
Yeah.
most books are written to be, become TV shows or
Mhm.
movies. It's very rare for long form comics these days, and it it kind of this series kind of scratches that itch for
Mhm.
the long form comics.
Right.
So, like they said, if you can't find it, make it.
Right. Which is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Okay. So they head into the library and they talk to Miss Meg, and Miss Meg tells them about the jailer of Duhok. And the jailer of Duhok was an ancient guy who was known for flaying his inmates. So basically taking the skin off of them, and using their skin to make like clothing, um, to be sewn onto other bodies, which is really a gross thing when you get down to it. Um, but the thing about the jailer of Duhok was that all his victims were dead first, or died while they were getting flayed, and when he sewed them up, they were dead as well. So there was never a someone who had the markings of the jailer of Duhok who was walking around. So Miss Meg clearly asks Alex, "Are you sure you're not out of your depth here? Because, like, this is gross even to her, and she has some experience with magic and esoteric stuff." And Alex is like, "No, of course not. I can handle it." Um, and so she leaves the library and, heads off to school. So it's time to go to school. It's been a while since she's been at school. Um, she sees Sarah, and the first thing Sarah tells her is, "You look terrible." Um, and offers to make some homemade soup. And Alex is like, "No, don't get too close. You'll get my cold." And they're sort of wandering through the halls, and uh, Jeff, comes up to Sarah and says, "Hey, are we still, playing video games later on?" And she's like, "Yeah, but only till 5 because grandma worries." And you know, Sarah's Sarah's opportunities have changed. She's become a little bit more popular now that she's on the hockey team. She's got friends on the hockey team who don't treat her like a weirdo. And that's kind of cool for her. She's never had that. And so Alex thinks that's cool for Sarah. Sarah thinks that cool. Matt thinks that's cool. It's kind of a nice little thing that's happening at school, but it sort of shows how they're sort of disconnected. There was a time when Alex and Sarah would be together no matter what, and now it's
Mhm.
really Sarah's off doing stuff with the hockey team, and Alex is trying to, deal with the jailer of Duhok by herself. Um, so that's going on. Alex heads off to class, and falls asleep in class and gets sent down to the principal's office, to the fridge's office. And when she gets there, things are kind of crazy because what she quickly finds out is that Nita has gone missing. Um, the fridge is on the phone with the Nita's school, and she wasn't even on the bus. Um, and the fridge says, "I knew that something was wrong because she was kept going on and on about this drawing that she had done." And when he pulls up the picture and Alex happens to be there and sees it, it's the Peacock King, and she kept saying, "The Peacock King, ring a ding ding." And now she's missing. And Alex knows that there's something there, and she has to find out what it is. She has to solve it because she's the only one who can do it in Alex's head, and so she rushes off. Um, I like the way that you show the fridge here. So the fridge in my mind is like this really big guy, and so, like, students are always scared of him. He's always angry, and he's always dealing with discipline, and here's a sense where we start to see what the fridge is afraid of, which is that Nita's going missing. And we know a bit that the fridge knows that Miskatonic is kind of there's some dark forces in this town, and he's afraid with her being missing what exactly is going to happen. And it's nice the way, again, you're so good at expressions to connote his fear there. Um, so I don't know. I wanted to ask you, like, how do you see the fridge? Like, because you draw him, kind of a lot now. Like, what do you think about him? Like, what do you think when you're drawing him?
Yeah, I always think of him as this big bear who has a who really is kind of soft inside, if you
Mhm,
think about it. I mean,
mhm,
he's strict with Matt and the other
mhm,
kids. He's usually there to. He's kind of like uh, Snape.
mhm.
He's always there to reprimand the kids,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
Mhm.
but he's always there to like guide them in the right way. It's
Right.
not out of spite or anything. Well, maybe Snape's
Yeah,
more of a little bit of
yeah,
spite.
or a lot.
Yeah, yeah, but Fridge is more of like he's tough because he was part of the varsity team
Mhm,
too back then, I think,
mhm,
and he's got this roguish sense about him.
mhm,
So he just likes to straighten the kids up all the
mhm,
time. And you're right, when it comes to his niece,
mhm.
that's where his vulnerability comes out. That's where you really kind of see his tender tenderness
Right.
and caringness. And yeah, I wanted to convey that he's really worried about her.
Mhm,
That I mean, it's bad enough when parents lose their children.
mhm.
Can just imagine if you're just taking care of
Right.
of the kids of your brother or sister. So
Mhm,
that really, in a way, it kind of reflects what the fridge is. It's
mhm,
kind of taking care of the students
mhm.
for the other for the parents,
Right.
because that's what the teachers and the faculty really are supposed to be doing, is to guide the children to the right path.
Right. And you're right. I always got the sense that the fridge sort of had, like, this soft center about him, that he actually cared about the kids. There was, if you remember the speech that Simon was giving back when he was running for president, somebody threw, like, a cup of soda at him. And the fridge is
Mm-hmm.
like, "You don't have to go on. It's okay if you wanna stop." And really got the sense that he actually, cared about what was going on and cared about Simon even in that moment, before
Mm-hmm.
Simon gave his speech and started, cussing. Um, but yeah, that's what I like about the fridge sort of as a character that we've developed so far, is that, there's not a lot of adults that are really trustworthy in this town, and the fridge is one of them. I mean, he's kind of an idiot, but he's also, at least his heart is in the right place.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. And, I don't know, we've talked about maybe developing him more with the kids. I don't think we've finally decided, exactly how that's gonna go.
Well, as we saw earlier, seems like Fringe knows a bit more than he's letting on,
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
especially when Nida uttered the name of the Kalimnar Ghoul and kind of
Right.
no, you it's just this thing. Don't worry about it. It's like
Right, that, the
he's
fridge the
stubbing
fridge
it
didn't
off.
the fridge wasn't like, "Oh, Khalib who?" It's like, maybe the
Yeah,
fridge
yeah.
knows more about this town than we think.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think you're
Definitely.
right. So, okay, having seen The Peacock King, Alex runs back to Kerwin's special collection in the Miskatonic University Library. Kerwin's there asking her what the heck she's doing, and Kerwin finds her a book about the Peacock King, and the Peacock King is actually a real thing. It's uh, a a mythological character named Melek Tas. Um, and he was, according to legend, he was a being who refused to subjugate himself before man or God. So, okay, so he served God before man came around, before God made mankind. And so God said, you don't serve anybody but me." And then God made mankind, and all the other angels, the archangels, bowed before Adam and all of that, except for Melektos. He said, "No, I'm not going to do it. I only serve God." And there was an interpretation of that because he refused to bow to mankind, that he must be serving Satan. He must be, a Satanist. So that mythology sort of ran away and became what he became known for. So the Peacock King is the idea of someone who seems like they serve Satan but maybe doesn't. Um and it's kind of complicated and it's deep and it's like there's more to the story than most people want to think about, which is kind of what Alex is sort of going through. Um
Yeah, I'm unfamiliar with that story, but that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it came up from a comic book I read where it was a superhero, and the superhero was based upon it and was a Satanist character, and so I was wanted to know more about it, and as I dug into it, I found out that it was a lot more to it than the idea of being a Satan worshiper and, what it actually meant, and so it always sort of was lingering in the back of my head, and when we were
Well, the
yeah,
term Satan anyway is connotes to something like the enemy.
mhm,
So usually that's just something that people use to vilify people.
mhm,
So this could be something, but
right, which is
I
sort of
don't really know.
right, but that's also sort of what Kerwin gets to at the end, which when they're talking about it, um, that there's a lot more to this, but so we'll get back to that in a little bit. But what Alex asks is Kerwin is, "Do you know of anyone who has any relation to Melik Tas?" And he's like, "Well, there's this professor you could go see, but you'll need an introduction." And so he sends the Hound with Alex over to the museum, which is at the university. Um, I like the idea that the Hound is sort of it's well, obviously the Hound is Kerwin's familiar. He does Kerwin's bidding for him. But because Kerwin is sort of tied to his location and doesn't really leave, he probably sends the hounds out to do his bidding. And so, anybody that came with the Hound to see these people would probably be, it's a sign that they're okay, that it's someone that they can talk to. And so she goes and meets Professor Jacoby, um, or Jacoby, whatever, however you want to pronounce it.
Jacoby?
Jacoby, yeah. Professor Jacoby, of course, is in over his head. His student assistant just quit. Everything's going wrong. He's trying to get this exhibit set up for today, and here comes Alex and the Hound, and so he's like, "All right, come on, come to my office, and what does Kerwin have to offer?" And Alex is like, "What are you talking about?" And Jacoby says, in trade, he only contacts me when he has new knowledge. Don't waste my time if you don't have anything. And I like the idea, and this sort of dates back to um, Shadow Out of Time, where that there's these people, and they all are sort of doing their own research into the esoteric, into the really weird and the magical, and the eldritch arts and all that. And really, the currency that they use with each other isn't money or anything like that. It's knowledge. It's a new bit of knowledge that they don't already have. And so when Kerwin would have a new bit of knowledge and he needed something, he would trade. He would bring that knowledge, that whatever new evidence or spell or whatever he found, and bring it to Jacoby, and he would trade it with Jacoby for something that he wanted. And so what she has to offer, the only thing she has to offer, is the jailer of Duach and this picture that she took. Um, so Jacoby is interested in that, and he wants to know, well, what do you want? And so she asks, what have you heard about the Peacock King and a missing girl? And he's like, I don't know anything about it. And so she's like, okay, well, then we should go. And he's like, no, wait, maybe there's something else I have. And he starts going through these things, like maybe it's, Mary Williams, who is Matt's mom, or Professor Harris at Dunwich Prison, who is Simon's dad. And, finally he
Mhm.
stumbles upon, um, you said a child, perhaps one who has visions. And she's like, wait, what? And apparently, somebody came by during the night when he wasn't at the museum and left a note with the security there, that he was looking for Jacoby's professional opinion about a child who has the innate ability to see beyond. That there have been reported cases in some of the ancient tomes that Jacoby has, and wanted to see if there was any evidence, in his sales pitch to the old man. And he signs it M. And Alex asks, well, who's M? And Jacoby's like, I don't know. I know too many people named M. Um, so she trades the picture of this guy with all the stitches that used the jailer of Duhawk's method, um, to Jacoby. And in turn, while she's texting this picture to him, she's copying his list of contacts under M so that she has them to try and figure out who M could be. Um, and decides to head off. So let me ask you this, because I thought the museum was like a cool place. One of the things that I really like about this is we sort of go to these little places that we don't see a lot of, that we haven't seen a lot of before, but you get the sense that this is sort of the Miskatonic that we haven't seen. So like the museum or like the antique shop, that there are these pockets of sort of the eldritch community. And so I'm kind of curious, like, how you approached the museum in Jacoby.
Yeah, well, I've always thought of the esoteric or the eldritch elements of this series to be uh, more hidden, but also in plain sight,
Mhm,
if you know what I mean. I mean,
mhm,
if you go to the right places, you will find them, but not
mhm.
overly so. Like, you probably won't see a museum of mythos
Right,
creatures in
right, right, right,
Miskatonic, unless probably in the very bowels of
right,
the Arkham Society or something like that.
right. Members
But
only. Yeah.
yeah, like in the second panel, we can see many relics and artifacts from known civilizations
Mhm,
like Egyptian, Assyrian,
mhm.
Greek, and then in the very background, we see something that's familiar.
Yeah.
There's a real engraving of this. I can't remember if it's Sumerian,
Mhm.
wherein the king is sitting and his followers are as tall as him while he's sitting down. So you can imagine him, if he's standing up, he'd be 9 feet tall.
Mhm. Yep, yep.
So people always assume that this guy's an alien.
Mhm.
He, his head is shaped differently, and
Mhm.
then there's this engraving in the background of it of the sun and the nine spheres in it.
Mhm.
How would ancient people know about the 9 planets and the solar system in
Right.
that time
Mhm.
if you did not come from outer space?
Right.
So I thought this was the perfect opportunity to like merge mythos with real ancient civilization stuff,
Mhm.
which is all in my field of interest.
Uh-huh.
So I just put a little thing there that people probably won't even notice.
Hmm.
And then I scattered some other Cthulhu artifacts here and there.
Hmm.
Not
Yeah, I
too
noticed.
much. Not too
Hmm.
much. I mean, the professors, like you said, deal with information. For them, information is power.
Right.
More esoteric knowledge you have, the more you have an up against the your competitors.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
in this case, I think most of them will not show what they have. I mean, they won't show their hand.
Right.
They will keep the special things close to them
Hmm.
and then just display the things that, just ordinary stuff that's not really important,
Right.
like strange tablets and stuff
Hmm.
that people would just, oh, interesting stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, it's kind of
And
it's almost like the dragon's hoard, you keep the most valuable pieces, close to you in your own cave. And when they go to Jacoby's office, that's his cave, and so that's where all his
yeah,
precious things
correct.
are. Yeah. Yeah. I really like that. Okay, so with this note from M, she knows that he had something valuable that he wanted to sell. And so she figures he was probably trying to sell Nita. And when he said to the old man, there's only one person in town who fits that bill, and that is Matt's grandfather, who lives in the old mansion up on the hill. Um, and she needs to get in, and the only way that she's getting in is with Matt's help. So she calls in Matt. Matt's like, please don't make me do this. And she's like, yep, you gotta. And he's like, okay. And so he goes up to the security gate and says, hey, it's Matt Williams. And security's like, nope, your grandfather's indisposed. Does your mother know you're here? And he's like, oh, she's the one who told me I had to be here. I'd rather be at home playing the video games. And so they're like, all right, come on in. And so they head in, and they go into this sort of really big room with all these relics from Miskatonic's past, and we saw it from a lot of them from our sort of time travel story in issue 11, and some of the historical stuff that we did in issue 13. And so there's the time travel machine right there, which I thought was awesome, as well as the painting that we saw, of the original settlers, as they were
Mhm.
sort of doing their massacre. Um, I thought this was really cool. I've seen this in movies where like rich and powerful people have like these big rooms, and so they sort of set them up like museums. And this is sort of exactly what I was thinking of when I sort of suggested it in the script. And I'm kind of curious, like how you approached it when you were sort of designing this room.
Yeah, well, the thing about this is that it's hard to come up with ideas of what to put in it because
Mhm.
you don't really want to oversaturate it with what the Arkham Society really knows about. So
Mhm.
this is more of a Williams thing, like
Mhm.
what they went through in their past. So it's
Mhm.
not really esoteric in nature.
Right.
There are
Mhm.
some, but it's more of how the family came to this land and
Yeah.
how they got involved with witchcraft, and
Mhm.
that's why we see some of those disturbing images in the background, and we see some of the esoteric books but not necessarily connected to the cults or anything, but
Right.
more on their side, more
Right.
on the Arkham Society side.
Right.
So
Yeah.
this is their treasure trove in terms of the Williams
Right.
household.
Right. Which is exactly, you did exactly right, because really the Williams are the sort of rich, important family in town. And, of course they would make kind of a museum or a shrine to themselves and their, the important history that they had in the town. So yeah, I think that's exactly right.
It kind of calls back to the previous issue
Mhm.
wherein we see the journey of the people in the Misty Village, was it?
Yeah, the Misty
Something like
River,
that.
yeah, Misty Creek,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it's kind of similar to that,
Mhm,
and that we see their kind of history. I think people tend to commemorate their history a
mhm,
lot. I mean, that's how European families,
mhm.
clans, or tribes came up with their family
Oh,
crests
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
stuff.
mhm,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my mother has a peculiar last name, and I looked it up and
mhm.
found out that we actually originated from from a from a prominent Spanish family.
Oh, there we go.
So it's kind of like the way people want to establish their history.
Mhm,
So they leave crumbs behind, and
right.
then they like collect stuff from their past.
Right. It's also, and I will tell you this as someone who's originally from New England, it's a very New England sort of thing to do, which is you have these like historical societies, about, the history of the town or the history of this family, especially all the rich families, because there are a number of old rich families there that they sort of
Mhm.
do that where they sort of again sort of make shrines to themselves, sort of museums to themselves, and then they hire people to run the museum about themselves for them. It's really kind of a crazy thing. So I yeah,
Yeah,
I Lovecraft wrote about it sort of obliquely in a number of his stories where he talked about visiting antiquarian societies and things like that. And this is kind of what he's talking about is, these sort of like rich families sort of keeping history to themselves.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But also it's kind of nice that we have Matt here because Matt is getting more and more interested in his family's history, and really having gone through it, through the time travel one, as we saw last issue, seeing the history of the people sort of pushed out of Miskatonic, we're really getting a sense that history is important to him, and he's starting to realize just how terrible the history has been of his family up to this point.
yeah. It's
So
been tumultuous to say the least.
yeah, right. Um, so Alex and Matt are there. Alex is trying to figure out, okay, if someone had something to sell and had come here, what would happen? And the grandfather's sort of nobody's seen him in a little while. They, supposedly something's going on, but Matt's mom really represents sort of the family now. And so if someone had come, security would have sent them off to talk to Matt's mom. And Alex is like, "Oh, security, of course. Let's go check the security tape." And so they head to the little security room and put the two security guards to sleep and start looking at the security footage, and they find this ambulance had driven up, talked to them, and they can't really identify who it is that was driving it. But they look and they can see in the back of the ambulance was Nita, and they find out, Matt's like, "Hey, move your finger," and they find out that it was from an asylum. So they decide, okay, Alex is going to go off and check the asylum, and Matt, and so they're leaving his grandfather's house, and Matt is kind of concerned. I mean, Matt and Alex have a good relationship. They're kind of, sort of brother sisterish sort of relationship, and
And that's why I found the exchange between the security guards kind of funny.
mhm,
I mean, you told me that you had concerns about the issue being too dark, and then
mhm,
I reminded you that no, this issue actually has a lot of
yeah,
funny stuff in it. Just like back in the school
mhm,
when Alex fell asleep,
mhm,
and then when she was talking with Isis, I think that
mhm.
was funny. And
Right.
then, I mean, it always gives a good dynamic when another character comes in.
Yeah,
So yeah, putting Matt in this issue was a very good idea, and like you said, adds more uh, gravitas to it because he is getting more involved with the family
right,
stuff, and they are connected because they are cousins.
right,
So, which will be more prominent in coming issues, I think.
right, exactly. And it's exactly like you said, so one of the things that we were doing was it's tough when a character is in the middle of a mystery, piecing the clues together. You got to figure out how is she going to relate those clues to the reader. And you can go two ways, and we did both, which is either you can do sort of narration where she's sort of talking, and so we have her writing in the book so that we can do some of that. But then also give her a character to talk to. And so we did that a couple of times. We did that with Matt. We did it with Isis. She even talks to the Hound a little bit.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And
Like,
what did he say?
"Grrr."
See, that's one of the funnier stuff too.
Right. Right. I'm the worrier. I tend to worry a lot. So, if an issue is getting dark, I'm like, uh-oh, are we going too dark? I'm always worried, like, what's exactly the right sort of mixture for a Miskatonic High? You don't want to go too dark. You don't want to go too funny. You don't want to go too angsty. You want to find the nice mix. And it's never, exactly the same amount, but you want it not to be too heavy one way or the other. And I tend to worry. So when I worry, I tend to write you and say, oh, I'm concerned. Is this too dark? And you're like, no, don't worry about it.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, the funnier stuff is more pronounced when the story is darker. I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of like a release
Hmm.
in a way because this is too much, and then
Hmm.
all of a sudden there's this light bit at the middle of it, and
Hmm.
then you say, "Oh, kind
Well,
of
and I think
kind of like a break."
right, and I think that's right because, like, you go see a horror movie, and horror movies always have people, right on the edge of their seat, and then something happens, and everybody
Yeah, correct.
laughs.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
the tie between horror and humor it's very close because of the tension.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think you're right. Okay, so let's see. So Matt is concerned about Alex, and what she's getting into. Basically, everybody's concerned about what Alex is getting into here. And Alex is explaining, it's with magic, she approached magic kind of like it was all going to be fun and games, kind of like Harry Potter, the first couple of books. He really approached magic as though this is going to be a fun thing that's going to take him out of the problems of the world that he has. And really what she's discovering is, fun and games is one aspect of it, but it gets a lot darker and a lot deeper very quickly. And she's sort of in it now. And
Yeah,
so,
well, she's finding out the consequences of her choices,
mhm,
not necessarily her actions, but her choices.
right. Right. And also, that this world existed before she got here.
Mhm.
It's not like there wasn't magic before and they're building this magic world. There's this whole magic world, and like most worlds, there's really, really bad parts of it. And she wasn't aware of
Mhm.
that, and now suddenly she's finding herself in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he gives her the advice of remember to keep your weight over your skates, which is, if an ice skating reference that, you know, uh, most kids learn when they first start ice skating, which is, you don't extend yourself too far over your skates or you're going to fall down. Because that's how he sees the world. He sees the world through, hockey.
Hockey.
Yeah. And then we get to one of my favorite bits, which is she heads to the Lennox Asylum. So the ambulance came from the Lennox Asylum, and so she's got to get there. And when I first wrote this scene, I did it all wrong, where she was going to go in and she was going to blast it, and it was going to be like some superhero thing. And very wisely, you took a look at that and it's like, no, this is not right. She should be sneaking in. She should be trying to she's trying to discover this. It's not something where she would just break in. Um, and so we have her turn invisible and sneak in, and there's the nice scene where she passes three characters from Lovecraft stories who
Hmm.
I think you captured really well. Let's actually, yeah, let's talk about that. Um, you know, in the script and what we talked about was that there were going to be these three sort of cameos of these characters from Lovecraft stories, and you had a very small window in which to capture their personality. And I'm sort of wondering how you approach that, to know that okay, you were just going to be able to show their head, maybe a little bit of their background, to really capture who they were. And I'm wondering how you approach that.
Yeah, well, obviously these characters come from 1920s and 1930s, but
Hmm.
we had this idea to like make a contemporary versions of these characters.
Hmm.
They may not necessarily be that same characters from the Lovecraft books. Maybe they're descendants, or
Right.
maybe they're they're the contemporary versions of it.
Right.
So like you said, I had to pick a something that would be recognizable to people who know Lovecraft, like
Hmm.
Pigman's
Hmm.
model,
Hmm.
and then the stench coming out of Waitley, and of course his strange goat-like appearance.
Hmm.
Of course, we don't see the rest of his body, so we don't really have a sense of what he really looks like. But just making him bigger and
Right.
ominous looking in there
Yeah, and elongated. Yeah.
makes it kind of work. And
Hmm.
for Carter, it's just the crazy book reading conspiracy type.
Mhm,
But yeah, it's always interesting to interpret characters that people know, and it's
mhm.
also kind of um, scary because people have ideas about them. But
Yeah.
yeah, but it's always great to put in a little cameo here and there.
Mhm. Yeah, you sort of suggested the idea of these cameos, and I loved it the moment that you recommended it because I think it really worked out well, and it's I've talked to a number of people who read our comic, and they sort of fall in two camps. One who really loves sort of Lovecraftian stuff and really knows it, and then some people who have never ever read Lovecraft, don't really have an interest in reading Lovecraft, and really sort of approached it as this high school magic horror comedy, and so sort of aren't really picking up on those cues. And you really have to write it for both of them. And
Mhm.
so, it's kind of nice to be able to do these as cameos where you put them in for people who want them, but it doesn't overpower the rest of the story.
Correct, correct.
Yeah. So she sneaks in, and what she finds in the asylum is the doll and another picture of the Peacock King that Nita had been drawing. And there's this inmate next door who says, she's not here. And I know you're there, girlie, because Alex is, of course, still invisible. And we see the sort of wet puddle footprints from her walking through the snow. She appears and has this conversation with this sort of anonymous inmate who's got scars on him and things like that. And she's trying to find out where is Nita. Um, and he says that the orderly and the other guy snuck her out in an ambulance. That they talked tough, but it was clear that they didn't want anyone to know that they had stashed her here. Um, she wants a name. She wants to find out who M is and exactly, what was going on. But the inmate is sort of offering different information, which is that Nita could see the future. Um, that she is capable of seeing into the future of what's going to happen. Um, and he, of course, wants to do it for whatever reasons he has, but that they're not good ones for Nita. Um, and she still wants the orderly's name. And so the inmate says, if you give me the doll, I'll tell you who the orderly is." And Alex is like, Okay." So she hands over the doll, and the inmate tells us that the orderly's name was RJ McCormick, and McCormick was Robert McCormick, who owned the antique shop. Sean McCormick was the guy, the college student who was running it, who she met. Um, and in her mind, it makes perfect sense. McCormick for M. And so
Hmm.
we'll get into that in a second. So let's talk about the inmate, because I think he's an interesting guy. Um, to sort of offer information. It's whenever we can, it's nice to have characters hint at a deeper, darker world that we don't know a lot about yet. And he's sort of doing that. He's sort of talking about the society, he's talking about the cult, and he's sort of hinting at things that are going on. And he clearly has more knowledge than Alex does about it. And it's another situation where Alex is in this position where she's looking for information, and there's nobody that she can trust, and she's trusting people that maybe she shouldn't be. And so the
Hmm.
latest person is the inmate. And so I'm kind of curious, like, how you decided to draw the inmate, how you picture the inmate, for this.
Well, I always thought he was going to be prominent in future issues, so I didn't
Mhm,
really want to show what he really looks like,
mhm,
and instead just focused on what can be seen,
mhm,
which is his scars.
mhm,
So maybe when we do reveal him in the future, this will
mhm,
be kind of a hint
mhm,
of who he is,
mhm,
who he really is.
mhm,
So yeah. So yeah, he's a mysterious person,
mhm,
and we don't really know much about her. When we talked about putting the cameos of the Lovecraftian
mhm,
characters, I thought it was a perfect opportunity to introduce another character,
mhm.
because we didn't really want Alex to be communicating with uh, the three of those.
Right,
So we had to come up with a fourth inmate,
right.
and we came up with this guy.
Mhm.
So can't really talk much about him. Sorry.
All right, fair enough, fair enough, fair enough. Yes. Okay, so she's sort of putting the mystery together, and so she is heading back to the antique store, and again, had talked about how when you're doing a mystery, s s sometimes you have to convey to the reader what's going on. Some readers will have put it together and figured it out. Some of them won't, and so you sort of, to some extent, need to hold their hand. And she's sort of talking through the mystery, which is that M had kidnapped Nita and taken her to the asylum, where he learned about her abilities to see the future. He took her to the museum to try to get some information about her precognition, but Professor Jacoby wasn't there. So M and RJ went to sell Nita to Matt's grandfather, but they were turned away because grandfather's not there, and they needed to talk to the mother. So unable to go back to the asylum, they had to go someplace else because, as the inmate said, they clearly didn't want anybody to know that they had been stashing Nita at the asylum. And so there was only one place they could go. But in for again, what had led Alex to this mystery was the Peacock King. And she had thought the Peacock King represented a cult or something else about who had kidnapped her. But she's realizing that what if it was something else? What if it was something that Nita could see and could hear? So the sound of the bell when you walk into the antique store goes ring a ding ding. And there's a piece of stained glass sitting right there in the front that looks like a rainbow. But when you look at it, the way it projects when light hits against it to the wall, it looks like a peacock with a crown, like a peacock king. So she goes back and figures out, she's going through the list of contacts from Jacoby's phone, and there he is, Sean McCormick, who was the student assistant who quit. who was Professor Jacoby's assistant. And of course, so putting it all together, Sean was the piece that fit in all of this thing. And so she goes to confront Sean, and Sean knows that she knows now, and he's going to kill her. Um, and so he tries to shoot her with a crossbow. She confronts back with her water power. And really, as they're sort of going back and forth, they're also talking about how it's kind of this thing of who killed who first. So Alex is pissed off because Sean's father killed her mother. Sean is pissed off because Alex killed his father. So it's kind of this conflict that's now spanning generations. And they're sort of trapped in this sort of struggle against each other.
Mhm.
Um, she goes down, and RJ is there, and he captures her. Um, Sean goes to shoot the the crossbow at Alex. She puts up a shield, and the crossbow bolt goes into RJ by mistake and ends up killing him. So Sean has now killed RJ. Sean's completely crazy now. Um, and Alex is just running through this basement underneath the antique shop, and she's coming into all this Cult of the Red Rose stuff. So we see the Khalib Nargul statue. um and Sean is just sort of yelling at her about how she ruined everything and that his father knew it all along. And as she's sort of wandering around, he comes up and he throws the powder, the gauzy powder, in her eyes so she can't see. um it was something that he says it was something that dad sold but not in the shop. It's used to reveal the invisible, but it also temporarily blinds when it comes into direct contact. He's like, it'll only outlast for, maybe an hour or so, but that's going to be the last hour that you ever have. Um, and then we get to this point where she is blinded. And this was kind of a tricky part. I wasn't sure when we sort of came up with it, when I wrote it in the script, that this was going to be something that we could pull off, which is we had to be able to convey through dialogue how Alex is both hearing the present, but also remembering the past.
Mhm.
And, this is from a purely lettering standpoint. It's why we did certain things. We gave Alex a cold so that her speech pattern would look different throughout this issue, so that we could recognize her. Nita has her own special um voice pattern, to look kind of crazy, maybe a little psychedelic, so that when we see
Yeah.
her, we understand, that she's talking. And so that, when Sean is talking, we know, that he's talking. Um, and to be able to convey through the words what is going on. And he tells this story about how his father had killed Alex's mother, but felt really guilty about it. Robert was a guy who was kind of messed up, ever since his wife died. Had really sort of been messed up, which is something that I think we talked about, which is, people who are in cults are not normal people anyway. They're people who are sort of on the edge. They've gone through something. They're not quite right in one way or another. And so I sort of wanted to be able to get that from Robert's personality, that he had been through a lot, but he found something in the Cult of the Red Rose that he really embraced, and it became to explain why it became such a force in his life that he would want to do it. Um,
Yeah, it's quite similar to uh, people who join fraternities.
mhm,
They want their not everyone, but most of them are like social misfits or
mhm,
pariahs, and then they find acceptance in fraternities.
mhm,
It's the same way with the cults, I think. It's
right,
that you don't find it in normal religion,
right.
and you end up searching, and then when you finally find it, it ends up to be this strange and mysterious thing, and then when you find the answers there, you just go all in.
Right. And it pulls you in, it's I've always kind of looked at cults as sort of, normal religion doesn't ask you to do crazy things. They ask for your belief, but they give you something back. The idea of a cult is they also ask for belief, but then they ask for a lot more than that. They pull you in, and next thing you know, you're giving them all your money, or you're doing things that you wouldn't normally do. And it has that power over you, that hold over you. And so really wanted to show why the cult of the Red Rose would have this hold over Robert. And it's really that he was dealing with a loss, which is
Well,
something that,
it's
Mhm,
well, it's the same thing as we discussed with Jacoby
mhm,
earlier, wherein information is power.
mhm,
And to enter a cult, you're asked to sacrifice a lot of things
mhm,
because they have information that it's
mhm,
very sensitive
mhm,
and that they want to keep within that cult, secrets
mhm,
that they want to keep in that brotherhood.
mhm.
And so you have to be prepared to sacrifice a lot of yourself and others
Right,
to achieve that
right,
information.
right. But also that, Robert is dealing with the fact that somebody died and he wasn't dealing with it very well. And it's sort of related to how Alex has never dealt well with with how her mother died, and sort of is kind of messed up, and sort of she embraces weird things in kind of a similar way. You could easily see Alex getting sucked into a cult, and becoming part of it, to escape her house and her home life that she doesn't like, and just
And
embrace it.
find answers.
Right. And I liked that. I liked that play between, that Alex could have easily gone this way. She could easily have become Sean, or she could have become Robert. She could have become one of these people. And instead she happens to be on the other side of it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So Sean talks about Khalib Nargul and what he offers, which is the idea of eternity. And for him, really what it means is that his dad is going to have life again, and that his mom is going to have life again. That's really what eternity offers, is something out of death. That death is not an end, that people come again. Um And so that's something he embraced. It's something his dad embraced. And it's really why sort of they get pulled in deeper and deeper into this. And when um when he saw Nita outside, and she said something like, "You'll end up dead, Alex," which is, for Nita, something that she's going to hear in the future. But to Sean, that registered immediately. He had just met Alex. He knows who Alex was. He now knows that this seer sees something about her and her death. And so it became really important to him. And so, a guy who is at, making poor decisions, kidnaps Nita, and that sets off this whole mystery. Um, So he has decided that, okay, the future is that Alex is going to die, so he's got to go find the crossbow to kill her. And oh, that's right, he left it over by where his brother RJ died, and so he goes off to go get it. And so she is there. Um, she thinks by herself, but then she hears Nita, and apparently Nita is there too. And she's trying to have a conversation with Nita, but of course Nita is can't is not able to speak in the present to Alex to register where she is. Um, and so Alex is like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I remember you were talking to me outside of the shop and you told me something. And now you were in the future, and it was now that you were talking about the light on the wall, the Peacock King, and the sound of the bells, the ring a ding ding. And so Alex is putting together that Nita was talking to her from now back to then. That it's this Nita, it was living her life in the future. She sees the future. She is living in the future. When she talks, she's talking in the future. But the problem is the people she's talking to are not in the future.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but Alex is putting it together that Nita, what she was saying back then is for her now. And Nita is trying to help her and to help herself get out of the situation that Sean has got them in. And so she's trying to come up with this. And what she comes up with is the things that Nita said clearly were not Nita's words. Somebody was saying them. And so she figures out, okay, Nita, you repeat everything that Sean says. And I will remember what you said back then. And hopefully it will lead us to know exactly when I can attack to get to know exactly where Sean is. Because that's the problem is she's casting out her water powers, but she can't hit him because she can't see him. Um, and so we get Sean's speech, and Nita is telling it to us, and she's remembering Nita having said it. And she's trying to remember exactly when Sean is going to strike. And she remembers Nita saying, "My God, now." And so Alex knows exactly then she's going to do it. And she casts out as hard as she can with her water power. And for a split moment, she can see exactly what she's doing, which is she is striking Sean with all of her water power that she has. And then Sean isn't answering anymore. And Alex is really on her own. And she knows that exactly what she's done to Sean, because it's, again, we sort of talked about this, about Alex is having problems with things getting really dark and people dying. Her mom died. Now Sean has died. Robert's died. It's all of this death is just sort of falling around as she gets deeper and deeper into this. And so then we flash back. She remembers back to Robert's death and how he died. So one of the questions I had, so because I was really unsure about this whole sort of blind section, and I'm kind of, I talked to you and eventually sent you the script, and was kind of curious, like what you thought about this, because it was kind of a lot to put on you to say, hey, we're gonna do the big part, the big final confrontation between her and Sean, and we're gonna do it practically without pictures. And so I'm kind of curious, like, what your take on that was.
Yeah, at first, when I heard about that, I thought, well, I don't know if that's going to work. I mean, I mean, it was a great idea in your part to like differentiate the lettering,
Mhm.
and that's where I always see lettering as an essential part of comics. I
Mhm.
mean, it is essential,
Mhm.
but I mean, in terms of storytelling,
Yeah.
this is the power of lettering.
Mhm.
If you really do it right, you can really convey things
Right.
even without pictures, like
Right.
you said. So when you told me that, I said, "Yeah, I think this will work."
You had a
And
lot more confidence
then,
than I did.
yeah, but you also had the idea of interspacing it with previous images, which I
Right.
thought was also a good idea. I
Right.
mean, it will help readers visualize what's really going on.
Right.
Because if we only did it with blank panels,
Yeah.
it will be kind of confusing for the readers. So
Yeah.
in this way, it really pulls them back to the previous pages and then makes them think, oh yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, she was talking strange that time, and now it's making sense.
Right.
So yeah, I think that really helped.
It was kind of a way, so we do flashbacks quite a bit, probably more than we probably should, but one of the things I was thinking was, by having nothing but black except for the flashbacks. It really made it clear in the reader's mind that they were in Alex's head and hearing what Alex hears, but also remembering and picturing what Alex remembers and pictures. But also that this was like a second mystery. So we had done the first mystery, which got us here. And now the second mystery is okay, how is Alex going to get out of this situation? And the we talked about this very early on, which is that the kids aren't going to be so able to overpower people that they're superheroes or anything like that. That really they're either going to run away and escape or hide or something like that, or they're going to have to use their brains to come out of the situation. And really wanted to have Alex sort of think her way out of this situation by using her memory and being able to piece the pieces together and sort of again putting the reader in that point of view where maybe they can put it together. What did they remember? And I picture readers, flipping back to see exactly what Nita said back then to see, oh yes, it does work. So I like it. I like when we can do things that are different, that it doesn't, that using the power of comics, like lettering, like
Yeah,
the
and
ability to go back and forth really quickly, those
and
things aren't things that you could do in a movie, but you can do it in comics.
mhm.
Yeah.
And to contextualize the idea of NIDA,
Hmm.
which I was kind of hesitant to talk about it in written form because it's
Hmm.
really hard to convey. But the idea of NIDA came from my brother, who is
Hmm.
kind of was in the spectrum, as
Hmm.
you call it,
Yeah.
but he's passed away now. Well, I mean, last year.
Hmm.
So he wasn't really able to talk. So he had to create his own language,
Hmm.
and we had to translate that so that we could understand when he needed water and
Hmm.
when he wanted to go to bed and
Hmm.
stuff like that, or when he wanted food.
Hmm.
So when I was younger, I always thought, what was really going on in his mind?
Hmm.
I mean, where was he?
Hmm.
I always imagined that maybe he's a superhero in another world, and
Hmm.
that his speech we don't really understand it because it's alien,
Hmm.
and he's talking to the people in that planet, and we
Hmm.
don't really understand it, but he's really doing important things.
Hmm.
And then we're taking care of his physical body, but his other body is somewhere fighting off crime and something like that. I mean,
Hmm.
it's something that kids would come up. I mean, that's how I viewed my brother when
Right.
we were younger. And so I thought we could probably make a story like that. I mean, I don't want to cloud chase or anything, but
Hmm.
I thought if we were going to make a story about someone seeing from the future,
Hmm.
might as well do it like this. And so I thought, what if this person was actively in the future?
Right.
And that when she talks from the future
Hmm.
because she's always in the future. She's never in the present. And
Right.
so when we talk to her, we wouldn't really understand what she's saying because she's, like I said, she exists, her brain exists in the future.
Hmm.
And that's how her precognition works. It's not like she can just turn it on and then
Right.
I can see the future.
Right.
So in a way, I think this was how the oracles were in back in the time.
Hmm.
If you like to imagine it like that, maybe the oracles were special
Right.
because that's what we call these people, people with people who are special. I mean, we don't really know what's going on in their mind. Maybe
Right.
they are doing something important, just like the oracles.
Right. I think it really relates back to a lot of the things that we've been talking about, which is, back in the day, the same thing with the outer gods, where people were trying to understand the world around them and the things that they don't understand, and they were giving it personality or mythology or weight or whatever. The same thing is probably true to things that they didn't understand about people as well. So people who are saying things in strange tongues or things like that, they gave them a
Mm.
certain weight, and they created a story around it to explain what it was. For our comic, what I really liked about it was whenever we come up with a power or something that somebody has, almost always it's also a curse. When you think about Sarah's power is very much a curse, but also Ren's is in her own way, where she's really haunted by these images that she can't escape. Really, whenever we give somebody a power, and so it made sense that for Nita, we're giving her a really strong power, but it's also really a terrible curse because she cannot live in the moment. And all these people who care about her, like the fridge, like Alex to some extent, they're not able to communicate with her, or they're not really effectively able to communicate with her in any sort of way that we would conceive of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I, we play with time a lot. It comes up a lot in the comic one way or another, where we're traveling through time, or someone exists in a different kind of time or a different kind of
Yeah,
space.
and that's why I thought it was
Mhm,
great for you to include the clocks in the antique shop.
mhm.
I mean, the old clocks would really be there in a real antique shop, but to
Right.
make it prominent in the background where the Peacock King was,
Right.
really puts a new light into it, so to speak,
Right.
literally.
Right. Because I mean, if you listen to what Sean is really talking about, and what Khalib and what Kerwin was trying to explain to Alex when she wasn't really listening, is Khalib Nargul is all about time. It's
Mhm.
this idea of eternity, and what does that really mean for them in terms of what Khalib Nargul can offer. And that's really sort of gonna become more important as we move along, but it's all these little elements that we're sort of touching on. So yeah, exactly. The clocks would be an element that Robert and Sean and them would be very cognizant of, or even subconsciously just have around. So no, I thought that was perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
college kids will be doing thesis on this issue in the future.
So okay, so after this, she is flashing back, and we're really seeing what happened in issue 13 when she went back in and sent the rest of them out of the library, which is she confronted Robert about what he did. And he was trying to defend himself, and she was pissed off. And, you know, he called her Alexandria. And it's something that always ticks Alex off, is because she's not Alexandra. She's Alexandra. She's not Alexandria. And everybody keeps calling her Alexandria of the prophecy or whatever. And so she just lashes out, because that's what people do, when they're ticked off, when they're at the end of their rope, they just do it. And it's something that Alex does, unfortunately. And when she does, people tend to die. She did it with her mother, and she crashed the car. She did it with Sean, and she ended up killing him. And here's a case that we see. She lashed out at Robert, and he fell backwards, and he fell on this sword, and he died, and she killed him. And this is when Kerwin offers her a rationalization for what she did, to say, look, you killed this guy, but he deserved it. He deserved it for a long time. He's the cult of the Red Rose, all this thing, and they're going to kill more people unless you stop them, and uses that as a way to get her to become his apprentice. That, as we're seeing, Kerwin is really sort of taking advantage of Alex.
Yeah.
So, okay, so she killed Robert. We get back to normal time, find out that yes, she killed Sean. Um, she's blaming herself for it, and she called the fridge and told him where Nita was. Told him that he couldn't ask any questions, and he comes. He rescues Nita, but he also warns, that if you keep messing with this magic stuff, you're going to end up dead, Alex. Which is, of course, what Nita had said, that Sean had heard and had, taken as a sign that he needed to kidnap Nita. So really, again, her existing in the future is influencing the past of how we got here.
Yeah.
Um, she cleans up so that there's no markings that she was there. Um, she says that she's writing this all down in the book to try and make sense of it. Um, she finds a picture of Trish and Anton in a cemetery, and she's not sure what's going on there. She takes that picture and then she leaves. She just cleans up and she heads back to Kerwin, and she confronts Kerwin because she, as you know, it's kind of, one of those things where the mystery never ends. It's like, okay, the mystery was Nita and what happened to her, and she solved that. The mystery is how she's going to get out of this situation, and she uses her intellect to get out of that. But there was always this thing, like, how did she get in this situation in the first place? And it was because Kerwin told her to. And so what does that mean? You know, why did Kerwin send her to the antique store in the first place? And Alex, she's noodling this through because she likes a good mystery. Because again, anything to, all those side quests, she's going to do them all. She wants to get really at the heart of this. And what it is why did Kerwin send me there? What did he know was going to happen? And,
Mm-hmm.
so she sort of confronts him about it, that he knew that this was going to happen all along, um, that Sean had kidnapped Nita and that he was going to try and kill Alex, about the photos that she found. And Kerwin just says, homework does, help you to learn. And so she finally comes out and says it. You can see the future, can't you? Just like Nita, but you're not trapped in the future. And Kerwin just says, if I told you everything that's going to happen, you'd never learn for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's where we left it off. That there's a lot going on there that Alex is in over her head with, and a lot of things that are going to point to the future. Like you said, I'm glad that there were some good humor bits in it because it got really dark there,
Yeah.
and Alex's story is getting really dark. So yeah, I liked it. I don't know. What do you think? Are you happy with this one?
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of darkness, I think all of the kids will be going through this for the rest of the season. So it's
Yeah.
it's not like it's only Alex.
Yeah.
Hey, you're picking on Alex.
Yeah, well, Alex is always the one who wants to get there first, so she gets to go through the darkest bit first.
Yeah, she wants to get the platinum, guys.
Yeah.
That's why she's doing all the side quests.
Yeah, well, if you don't do all the side quests, you're not going to get all the characters and all the worlds and all the other stuff.
Yeah, you won't get all the trophies.
Right, all the trophies.
But anyway, yeah, I really like this issue because, like I said earlier, it resonates more with me because it
Mhm,
has a little bit of my brother in it, and so it's kind of special that way,
mhm,
and it's just the right time because he kind of honors him.
mhm,
He's almost like a year gone from last year, so yeah, it's
mhm.
perfect way to kind of um, bring him in into this comic book
Yeah,
in a small way.
yeah, and I like it when we can do that. I think that makes the experience of making the comic a little fuller, but also I think it adds something to the comic. It makes it a little weightier. That I think readers pick up on when they feel like things can be true. That things come from life, whether they know it or not. That there's a little bit more there, and we've had a few of those throughout the series so far, and I think this is another case where like you can feel that there's something going on with Nita there, and there's a real family thing. You really can feel for what the Fridge is going through, about this person that he cares about, this family member that he cares about, but he isn't really able to communicate with her in any meaningful way.
Yeah, well, when it comes to storytelling, all we can really rely on is authenticity and being genuine about it.
Yeah.
I mean, lot of things can be told in subtle ways and in creative ways too. So
Mhm.
if when you put in little things like that, it like you said, it does add a bit more weight and authenticity
Yeah, and I
to an
think
otherwise fantastical world.
right. And I mean, I can tell you the stories that I like aren't just, beat 'em up superhero stories. It's usually when they get a little deeper, when something else is going on, and you get to like a real human situation and it gets a little deeper, it gets a little funnier, or whatever it is, that it takes that sort of next step. And, that's kind of what I always hoped, when we were making this comic, that we could do, a fun horror comedy, teenage angst things. But every now and again, there would be this little thing that would be like, okay, maybe there's some truth going on there too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And it's one of the things that really that's what I really enjoy about making this series
Mhm.
is little things like this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a fun book.
Yeah, it really was. Up next, we have Anton and Trish in a graveyard, and where it leads from there. And that's another fun one. I think people are really
Yeah,
gonna like that one.
yeah,
So,
I think the readers will really have fun with that.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, and especially yeah, people who know a bit of Lovecraft and they don't even need to know that much about Lovecraft are gonna have a lot of fun with that one, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, look forward to that.
Yeah, me too. Okay, that is what's going on here. I think that pretty much covers it. We'll go ahead and launch the Kickstarter for issue 18. Um, once we finish fulfilling issue 17, so probably look for it in early April, I think. So yeah, probably not too far away from when you're watching this. All
Cool.
right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ryan, as always.
Thanks.
All right. All right. Everybody have a good one.
See ya.